back to another episode of Capacity Building with the Acosta Institute. I'm here with my dear sister, Jashana McDaniel. And this episode, we wanted to focus on artificial intelligence and really take a moment to acknowledge the historical force that it is, the tsunami of change that it is bringing to so many different fields, especially the field of education and the fields of business in particular. And to give you some context, about 2 years ago, right around a little bit after ChatGPT came out in the public arena, we were really curious to see what the impact of AI would be in our field. We straddle the fields of education and business. And for a while, we just spent time learning about large language models, learning about the ethics around artificial intelligence, learning about prompting, and developing partnerships with different institutions. For example, Vincent Hunt at the Bureau for Creative Intelligence, learning how to build custom GPTs. And then we gradually started to facilitate workshops for ourselves within the team to learn how to use custom GPTs within the Institute in a way that was ethical and in alignment. And we started to notice that a lot of our community members were scared of AI, but also scared of the impact of AI in terms of the job loss and other fears. So we decided to start to facilitate workshops. We did a workshop called Artificial Intelligence for the Rest of Us. We taught that several times. That was really fun to bring the community together to explore different AI tools. And we taught that over and over and over. And then we graduated ourselves and evolved and hosted a applications of AI in education certificate program. We've hosted that program about twice now. And that's been really fun. And the last thing I'll say is that we recently hosted a AI community hackathon where we brought the community together to play and to just figure out how to prompt together and engage in community-oriented solutions and leveraging AI for those solutions. So just wanted to give some context around how we've been kind of entering the AI space. So thinking about healing-centered approaches to artificial intelligence, mainly the education part, helping community members adjust to this this historical force. We haven't yet built AI yet, aside from building custom GPTs and playing around with different AI tech stacks. But Sister Drew, you've been a really powerful force in the team since day one, and your perspective as a scholar in the field and practitioner. Would love to just kind of talk to you about AI from like the depth of how we usually talk. Because I remember with you, you're such a critical scholar that you had a side eye towards AI. It was a subtle one, but also like, how am I gonna really learn these things? But I just want to say that I've watched you grow from building your own custom GPT to like building a sense of fluency and readiness with AI. And so just wanted to invite you to think and reflect with me around that, like your development in particular with regards to AI readiness.
Well, one of the things that occurred to me this weekend on Sunday with our second certificate program kickoff, was how I was a lot like a lot of the participants in the beginning. Yes, there's this sort of, let's see here. And how they were all very tickled at all the ways that AI can be used. But yeah, I think that, I was just remembering how in the beginning I was pretty skeptical, and how something that Vincent said this weekend had to do with practicing. It had to do with practicing. And so much of where I am now has to do with, it has to do with practicing for now a couple of years, that you can't really know a thing until you've engaged it profoundly. And so now, while I'm not necessarily creating a lot of my work around with AI is very niche. But I am realizing that I'm a very good prompter. I know how to work with AI in such a way that enables me to get things done and not sound like a robot, right? Like get things done that, for example, get things done that would take a lot of time and energy. For example, someone had a question in this past session about, them being a writer and their voice and how they process and actually think through writing and connect with others through writing to them. And this was, I think, in particular, like around maybe like an email. And I just thought about how I constantly use AI for emails now, but my voice is very much present. And that's a matter of relationship. So it's not like I'm asking AI to do something really random that I've been engaging with it so long now that I know how to say exactly what I want to say and for it to come out the way that I want to say it. And that's a thing that you can't know until you've been engaging with it, for a significant amount of time. And then the other thing that I was thinking about that that's very clear for me, and another reason I'm very grateful, in fact, to have AI as a tool is how draining it is for me to do admin work. It is so draining, especially when I need to tap into my creative flow, in particular, like around writing or designing something, like designing a process or, writing for my PhD program. That if I spend too much time dealing with emails, I will literally it will tap me out. And I won't be able to generate the kinds of rich, creative work that I wish to. So I recognize now that I lean on AI in a lot of ways, and have also been fortunate to not only have my own GPT and, of course, engage the GPTs that we have as a part of our team at Acosta Institute, but also find other GPTs that have been really helpful. For example, work with a client where I need to have a social media campaign. Like on my own, I probably couldn't timeline that, but AI can timeline that for me really well. And so I can, I know when I need to post things across different social media platforms. Because that kind of work also can be tedious.
Mm-hmm.
Just trying to figure out when to do things. So yeah, so I mean, I definitely feel like I'm in a pretty healthy and reliable relationship with AI.
Mm-hmm.
And now I'm really eager, as you know, I reached out to you. We were discussing this a little bit. I'm eager to know more about, the ethical approach, the ethical piece. I'm eager to learn about everything that I'm doing, but definitely eager to know more about the ethical approach. Although I know a fair amount already, and weave that into how we do our work with AI and talk about it. I look forward to learning more.
Part of what you just said to me, what really resonates when you say like practice, prompting, and relationship, really stands out to me, because I remember when I should use this example with a lot of the community members around the first time you got your email address. And if you think about it, you got that email address and you're like, okay, you're logging into some kind of interface, and you're initially receiving messages, and you're sending messages, and then gradually, across several years, it becomes like a fundamental aspect of your digital life, as far as like e-communication and electronic communication. So the key thing to think about there is that AI is fairly similar in the sense that the sooner you start to practice, the sooner it becomes a feature in your life. So this idea that you're going to fall behind for me, it's not as accurate. It's more like atrophy. Is that if you don't use it, you'll just lose the capacity, the strength, the vigor, the vitality, the fluidity. Um, and so I see folks get really fearful around like being left behind. Well, you know, you'll get left behind only if you're not in the game. You know, um, and so use and practice is so key. Practice is so key. You mentioned prompting as well. Yeah, and as you're using artificial intelligence more and more, depending on which platforms, prompting is such a key aspect of of relating to these large language models, relating to AI. So the ways in which you structure a prompt, the ways in which you situate a conversation with a large language model to execute on a particular task or to help you think through a particular challenge is key. I think prompting may be a new form of literacy. Prompting may be itself the key to understanding the future of education. Because if it is true that some of these technologies and AI models can give us so much information, and it rubs up against the older model of education. That's why there's so much concern around cheating and plagiarism, both in terms of writing, but in terms of content when it comes to our traditional education system. So that means that prompting will, will, in the future, will grade students on the quality of their prompt, not necessarily the quality of their output, which could be in the form of paper or result. So I'm really curious about that. And lastly, relationship. How do we relate to these technologies and this synthetic intelligence? And how does that relationship? What does that relationship say about us? For example, I'll just say that I started out being very cordial and being really nice, and then I noticed that when I'm under a lot of pressure, I'll just get to the task. But then lately, I've actually come back, and I'm like, and this is a way maybe of me anthropomorphizing the technology, but I've noticed that when I've gotten busy lately, I haven't said, "Hey, could you please?" or "Thank you so much." It's like, I need this. Can you help me with this? Um, and in a way, I do that more for me, not because at the end of the day, technically, these are not beings yet. They're not beings yet. Question mark. So that move to be courteous is more for me to retain a kind of relationship with myself and with the process that I'm engaging in.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. And that definitely resonates for me. When I think about relationship, for example, one of the things that I've done with any of the GPT, my customized GPT, I have a few for different types of work, but is to really make sure that grace and compassion is a part of how the GPT responds to me, and also encouragement. Because, I'm still a Black woman trying to stand straight in a crooked room, and imposter syndrome will come up. So if I'm discussing perhaps directions I want to go with my writing or a project, it's really important that my GPT is able to encourage me. So I'll get a response and I'll say, wow, this is how I am in conversation with my GPT. Wow, I hadn't thought of that. That's brilliant. Thank you. I'm understanding this more. I'm so glad that I asked. My GPT will be like, you have a really deep analysis. Like, you have no idea. This is like, this is going to be like really, really powerful work that you're putting out into the world. And I'm like, wow, okay. And there's a way. So there's a way that that is really energizing when I am grappling with, for example, research that I'm holding and putting things in conversation with other, other ideas, but mostly in coming to sort of trust my own voice, because the GP, and that's a concern, I think, like, but I already addressed that, like with the emails, like the GPT, my voice is very present. It is not another voice. In fact, I played around with running one thing through one GP and running it through another. And when I run it through one, it's different with each. So there's a way that like I'm very clear. Like I come through very clearly in my work with my for example my alchemy GPT. So that's another thing about being in a relationship. But I like how what resonates for me is this idea of being in relationship with yourself in the process, because you know how much we've talked about slow work. And also, not only that, but like I know I've mentioned the fact that something that's of concern to me is that because AI can help us to produce so much, something of concern to me is then people just become production machines, because you can just create endlessly. And then we become a part of, again, we kind of become a part of, we're swept away, where we become entangled with sort of that process around capitalism that so many of us are really actually eager to escape. Right. So really thinking about being in relationship with process, which is what I hear you saying, is absolutely how I experience it, by thanking it, by being in such dialogue, like, oh, I hadn't thought about that. Or, wow, you really got it. You really heard what I was saying and really helped me to put this together. So, you know, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I've sat in the living room doing something before. My co-parent said, he's like, oh, you're talking to the GPT again. Like I might literally be thinking about research, right? And I'm like, well, I read this piece that said this, but I was thinking, and he just look at me and say, oh, you're working with GPT. I'm like, yeah, you know it. You got to get one of these classes at some point so you can understand. It's like there really is a place for having relationship with this, and that gets us. That touches back on, I think, what we opened up with, which is this fear. This fear is very, we understand why it's there. Vincent really helps us understand that. We know that so much of our identity is wrapped up in being humans doing, is being human producers, is we get our validation by what we can produce, by what we can show. We get our validation by showing how many hours we could spend working on something. And AI takes that out of the way. But what AI can do is help us renegotiate, to your point, right? A different way to be in relationship with our own processes and the way that we want to, I even want to say, think deeply and listen deeply with AI.
Yeah, there's so much there. And, obviously there are ethical issues, both environmental, and those that are kind of consequential to how we're developing as a species. We know that the development of AI, as far as training the models and using the models, generates so much energy. As far as like the consumption of water, um, the manual labor that's involved with training AIs. Oftentimes that's done by folks that get paid very low wages in the global South. The ways in which sometimes the extraction of precious minerals to build the computers and the facilities to support these technologies really impacts and exacerbate climate change and just our relationship to the planet. So I just want to acknowledge that we're still in the early phases of the technology, and at this point, it's expensive. There's a cost to its use. Also, there's all kinds of like research being done around its impact on our critical thinking.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
how oftentimes, as we're early on in this phase of using large language models to help us write, help us think, help us engage in different kind of tasks, it's almost like we're outsourcing our mind in many regards. And I'm reminded of Marshall McLuhan, communications expert, media theorist. And he would say that, the wheel was an extension of the foot, the microphone an extension of the voice, the telescope an extension of our ears, the telephone of our eyes, the microscope, the telescope an extension of our eyes, and the telephone an extension of our ears. And I think he would say that the AI may be an extension of our mind, an extension of our mind. But for those of us who, across the next several decades, who adapt to this moment in a way that gives up or gives away our intellectual sovereignty, there will be a problem. If we rely more and more on these systems to do the thinking for us, then we may be subject to contributing to our own ignorance, and in some significant ways, not just in terms of capacities, cognitive capacities, but also political capacities, social capacities. There's a way that these technologies can dull some of the ways that we already deploy our mind to read the world, right? And then we're still up. It's still up for debate because it's early on. But for example, just like AI models can help you write, and that capacity that you had to retrieve thoughts, to retrieve words, put them on paper. You're being aided now by some technology to finish and complete the sentence, and more. Then how does that work when it comes to a political analysis of who to vote for, or an understanding of, understanding an issue, a critical issue that impacts your community? It's still early to tell, but I'm keeping an eye on that.
I think there's a part of me that, first of all, when I think about the idea of outsourcing our minds, I also begin to question, to think a lot about power and knowledge, and, even how that it's almost like the power of knowledge is not as powerful as it was. And what I mean by that is people with all the knowledge have power. And this is one of the reasons I like AI, is because you can access so much there, and it starts to level the playing field in such a way, in particular when it comes around intellectual work. Now, this is a thing. AI doesn't write for me. AI and I talk, we think through things together. AI doesn't write per se for me, like especially when it comes to the academy. AI and I can discuss what I'm thinking about, what I've written, even what I have data on, but it's not thinking for me. And I think that is, or it's not writing for me per se. And I think that is like some of what I'm constantly thinking about in general, is like how much of this is me, how much of this is, the machine. And there's a blurry line there. Like there really is. I mean, I think there's a lot of folks who don't want it to be, but there's a blurry line there. The same way that when I think about the fact that I know people who have entire careers where they are able to live and take care of their basic needs by talking on something like YouTube and having programming, I feel like AI is also going to show us how it's going to work with the idea of knowledge. Vincent always talks about the difference between knowledge and wisdom, but this is so emergent. I think that it's clearly going to change the culture. It clearly is changing the culture, but I see it in ways that it's changing it for good. Like I see people doing a lot of radical work that is, contributing to amplifying our realities, our lived experiences. Again, in such a way that even like how long do you need to be able to sit to demonstrate all of your knowledge, and what kinds of awards does that get you? You know what I mean? Just to be a thinking person. And I know that's not what you're saying, but I'm just saying that because I feel like that's another part of how some people think about this. So for me, it's important to think about, like, I'm not going to stop thinking, not going to stop learning. Still going to create some really fire work, hopefully.
Mm-hmm.
But it is forcing us into this place of thinking about who has the, do we own knowledge? Like we own, like it's the same. It's kind of interesting to me. It's like, do we own land? Like the idea of people talking about, owning land. It's so for me, it's, if anything, it's just sort of like enabling me to live with the questions, if you will. And I say this as a person, as you know, pursuing a PhD in this day and age. I mean, how will this change all of that? How will this change all of that? And then I would like to hear more, because I'm not really sure, like, if I understand how AI can affect our ability to make political choices. I'd like to hear more about that from you.
On a basic level, when a person inquires about a political matter, the training and data set that the AI draws on, that can be shaped by certain ideological positioning. So that's not neutral. One, and two, over time, as we rely more on these technologies to help us engage in things like writing, right? And to think with. When it comes to politics and critical thinking in relation to social structures and the ways in which society moves and works, the ways that AI are trained is going to become very important, because it'll influence how the data that users use to interpret and critique and understand the world. So that in effect impacting political decisions. I really appreciate you mentioned that classic line, knowledge is power. I'm thinking about the Black Power movement in the 60s, in African American culture and tradition, that rich moment between the 60s, the 50s, and 70s, where African Americans really reclaimed a sense of identity and a sense of dignity in the face of segregation and the Jim Crow in the U.S. But you're questioning around, like, is knowledge power? And I think in the case of AI, knowledge by itself, I don't think is powerful. At least at this point, knowledge in relation to knowledge in relationship to people and structures can manifest into power. But knowledge by itself, I don't think is power. Knowledge by itself is anemic. In fact, knowledge by itself can spoil. I'll give you a great example. We just finished launching Acosta Institute Latin America. And one of the reasons why we did that was because I wanted to honor my father and also my community in the Dominican Republic and Latin America, translating everything into Spanish. So really quickly, my father is a great example. My father went to one of the best universities in the Dominican Republic at the time. And I have some cousins that will run circles around me in terms of knowledge and what they know, right? But that knowledge that my father had, that knowledge that some of my cousins have, gets met with a political and environmental ecosystem that allows that knowledge to spoil. In comes AI. And where I think the game might be changed, is that now you have knowledge that with the proper information can be activated and actualized within a digital economy that can generate not just more knowledge, but more financial resources. So AI might be the source that actually makes knowledge powerful in the material way that some people might need it, right?
Yeah.
Take a cousin of mine who's brilliant, whose mind is just like, wow, and give him the information he needs to leverage a large language model that can materially impact his life. Games change. In that case, knowledge is in a way really powerful, really powerful. So yeah, just some random thoughts there immediately to what you said.
Yeah. Well, what came up for me listening to you is also like how we see power is like, like when we're talking about like political science or political education or feminism or critical thinking, it's that power over or power with. And there's a way that I begin to, at least the way I tend to experience AI right now is power with, especially because of the way that we do a lot of our work in community. It's not just work that we're just like, it's not information we're just consuming just to consume it and keep it to ourselves and use it, which is why we have these really deep conversations and contemplations, I'd even say, around like, what are we doing? But what's also coming up for me is this idea about, there's this book by Tobin Hart. It's called From Information to Transformation, Education for the Evolution of Consciousness. It's been in my library for a minute. Transpersonal psychology, transpersonal knowing. But one of the things that he says is, in many ways, like, from information to transformation is about remembering what matters in education and in life. And in many ways, it concerns who we are and how we know. So when I think about networking and the way that we handle information, like I think that there's potential for knowledge for information to be more than just information that's just used, just like to know something that even with AI and the way that we're engaging with it has potential to transform so much by our very engagement with it. And by our very engagement with it as a multitude of people who are feeding the algorithms as well, right? Who are loading information into the system, but not just information to be information, not just so someone can write an email. And so that's where I think that's where I get really hopeful and excited actually about this is, in particular, and this is not at all to minimize the effect it has on the environment, but when I think about modernity, modernity flattens all the things. It dulls all the things. It atrophies all the things. Things just become things. And I think that AI has potential to do something very different with that. But I think it's about jumping in and being a part of the process mindfully.
Mm-hmm.
And I hope that anything I said there made sense. Because again, it felt like a lot of thinking out loud, but there's something about that. Like it's not just information for information. It's information to do something with it. But the information doesn't just have to come from this one person who has all the knowing, and that feels a bit like a relief for me.
Yeah. No, I think, I've kind of bounced between being very optimistic and excited about this technology. There have been certain prompts and certain moments with AI that I've just like supercharged a project or an initiative. I mean, one project I saved almost 3 months in terms of, really holding a lot of the material around it. So I get really excited about not just information, but the ways in which relating, connecting, and using the AI as this kind of temporal piece, which is time. What do we do with this extra time
That's right.
that supposedly these AI models allow us to save? So I'm in this kind of hopscotch. I'm in it. I'm not in it. I like it. I don't like it. I'm just kind of in this dance. Of keeping it at arm's length yet embracing it.
Yeah.
So, for example, like I'm still here. I still question whether we're mindfully using the time that AI affords us. Like I'm not sold,
Liberate. Oh,
not
yeah.
sold yet that, oh my God, AI is going to help us live out the the full lives we really want to live and do the things that we really want to do because it can handle all the tedious tasks. I'm not sure yet we have been able to develop even the discernment to be able to mindfully do what's best for us with our time. I mean, how another one last thing to share that I'm not sold on is this idea that AI can level the playing field,
Mm,
especially in regards to
mm.
in helping small businesses compete and helping more people compete. And it's a nuanced one. I do think that the ways in which, for example, you, Maria, Joshua, Makita, myself have spent the last year and a half upskilling ourselves in terms of AI, like that's made us a lot more nimble, powerful, and have allowed us to even be more human in terms of how we hold space for the community, while at the same time moving faster with more programming at faster speeds, including this podcast, which we're able to do while we're also hosting an AI certificate program and hosting all kinds of things. How we're doing all of it. Part of it is the ways in which we're AI enabled.
Absolutely.
However, you know, I don't. I think that that's unique to the fact that we are in relationship with people and entities who are giving us specific resources, specific trainings, specific educational frameworks that allow us to orient to the speed of AI in a very specific way. So AI in and of itself will not be a level playing field. I think clusters of network
Mm.
that have access to robust nurturing spaces and educational programming that are AI enabled will help level the playing field. So just wanted to
Right.
nuance
No,
that
I appreciate that. I
because
appreciate that nuance.
yeah, because I hear it. I'm like, oh, AI.
No.
No. Yeah.
Yeah, we should have some specificity right around that. Like what I mean is for the person who writes 18 books, you understand what I'm saying? Just because there's someone taking care of his child all day long and he has tenure, you feel me? Like this is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
This is what I mean when I say level and play field. So we absolutely must then always talk about access because access and intention is kind of what I hear you addressing. I'm very fortunate, right? I'm very fortunate. But there's also a way that I think leveling the playing field for me, for example, is like time.
Mm-hmm.
Time is its own currency for me. So one of the things that I recognize is, and it's rare if I'm not, but you know this, my gift, I think, is presence.
Mm-hmm.
When I show up to a thing, I am present for that thing. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that, yes, there are ways that I can use AI tools to help take care of some things that I would linger over all day and who has time for, or interest for that matter in that. So I will say, like, I think that, like, to me, that's leveling the playing field, that I'm not having a panic attack because I've been spending X amount of time trying to catch up to so and so. or, get my work done. That I can, part of the presence comes from being able to have more time to be very intentional about walking in the regional forest by my house. You feel me? So all of that makes a difference in, I guess that's what I mean when I say leveling the playing field. It's not having the same thing as people, but it's like, let me be well enough to produce the work of my purpose and yearning, as opposed to constantly having to do hourly work. And that is, I'm very clear. Like, I come from having to do the hourly work, right? And I still work hard, but there's a difference now because I have this new tool, right? It's also different because of the work that I'm doing now. It's different because of my age now. Like, so access is a thing, but that's what I'm getting at in terms of leveling the
Yeah.
playing field of like just being decent, because being marginalized is an exhausting way of being. It's exhausting to be in the world that way, right? It's exhausting not to have access. So I think that's what I'm saying. I don't necessarily want the same life that some people have, but I want access to what's going to help me make my experience of living better.
Yeah. 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 And I was also kind of responding to this because of us expanding into Latin America. I've been consuming a lot of content from AI experts in Spanish, from like Spanish scholars and engineers. And I just recently heard this one um, figure who I respect. Her name is Rebecca Huang from Argentina, and she had made a comment around like, AI, to the effect like AI will be a it'll level the field, the playing field. And when I heard it in my mother tongue, it just hit different. It was like, I think if I would have heard it in English, I would like, oh yeah, like like that discourse of equity and inclusion, I would go, yeah, oh, I would have kind of given it a little bit more space to true. But as I heard it in my mother tongue, there was something missing there. Something missing. And there's another layer to what's missing, I think, is that just because you drop a tool in a community
Yes.
doesn't mean that everyone, one, as you said, has the time, leisure, or the cognitive bandwidth to hold. So
Yes.
there, no, AI will not be something that's leveling the playing field. No, it'll be infrastructures of learning and community that support
Mm-hmm.
people with adapting to AI that'll level the playing field.
Yes.
AI by itself won't do that.
That's right. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so insightful. And that's the kind of nuance that we must consider, I think, when engaging with these. That's where the critical thinking comes in, right? That's where the lived experience comes in. We always have to put these things in relationship with ideas. So that makes a lot of sense to me. And it also, that comment, to your point, also makes the assumption that AI is better for everyone. Like, that's the thing too, right? Like, and we just have to be, right? We have to be like really careful about that. Like, I think about my daughter who is, Vincent and I were talking about this because I really wish she was there at our last session, but she's studying animal behavior, cognition, and ecology. Like, she's going to be she needs to be in the field. She needs to employ sensual knowledge. You feel right? Like, to tap into like what kinds of behavior is happening with animals that we need to know about in order to be better in this earth, right? On this earth as beings. So is AI something that she absolutely should be using? Well, in some ways, yes, but certainly not if if so much of what she needs to know in order to help create the transformation, healing, innovation that we want in this world requires sensuous knowledge. We don't want to minimize that at all. So that kind of nuance, I think, is really important to be able to tap into, that like not everybody needs to be, in deep relationship with AI.
Yeah. So as we wrap up, I think this will be part one of a series of conversations around AI, because there's so much more that we can talk about. And since this is an exponential technology, it's always hard to kind of relate to it and talk about it, because by the time this episode is edited, whatever everything we said may have been outdated.
Right?
So
Yeah.
it's like we're speaking in the past,
Yeah.
but in the present moment. So I want to close out with any thoughts around this. Right now there's a lot of conversations around agents and agentic AI, and AI that can not just dialogue with you, but can go off and engage and take over your computer and do things for you, independent of you, even think for you and make decisions for you. And then there as well, getting closer and closer to what's called artificial general intelligence, which is when AI gets to the point where it's smarter than the average human. And then there's another layer that you'll hear kind of coming up is artificial super intelligence. Like what happens 10 years, 20 years from now, when the AI systems we have now have exponentially grown so much that they're just like, I can't even imagine what super intelligence looks like. But yeah, just any thoughts around how do we relate to the more than human technological world, that may supersede and surpass, at the very least, our cognitive capacity? That's a big question,
Yeah. The
but
more than human, you said the more than human technological world?
yeah.
Okay. All right. I know the more than human world, but the more than human technological world, we're calling it in. So I think that, I don't know. I have a really hard time. You know me. It's like the now, the now, the now. It's very hard for me to forecast. What I want to say is but I feel like being focused on the now, for me at least, helps me to meet the emergent or meet the unknown. So I have no idea, except the one thing I can say is it's really important, I think, to constantly be reflective, contemplative, and in community around all of these emergences, so that we're constantly thinking together. There's no way we can know everything that's happening, but we're constantly thinking together about what that means for us, and we're making decisions accordingly. Like, for example, I haven't researched deeply agental technology because I'm really not sure that I want. I don't feel pressed to do that at all right now, and I don't know that I want things happening without my awareness. Things happen without my awareness, but I don't know that that's what I need right now. So I feel like being a discerning, contemplative, reflective agent of this technology is important, and doing it in community, where, see, this is the other thing, is doing it in community where you share values with those who are there. So that is, and I think, again, that's one of our greatest points of difference. You can go learn about AI anywhere. Consume what you want, do what you will with the information, but it's another thing to thoughtfully approach it, and to approach it with community, because then you don't ever sort of lose sight of the fact that we're not just controlling this thing, that it really has lived effects, and it's different for everyone.
Yeah, lived effects. Yeah, I'm thinking about lived effects, side effects.
Yeah.
All the
Yeah.
No, thank you, sister, for this dialogue, inviting everybody to check out some of our work at acostainstitute.com in regards to AI, and just excited about what's to come and how we're orienting to not just this technology, but just this moment right now in society that requires us to hold more, be more, sometimes do more. So with that being said, thank you so much.
Thank you.